It's been one of the biggest positions of strength for Michigan football for some time. I don't see that changing, even with Colston Loveland off to the NFL. Yes, you get an otherworldly type of guy like Colston Loveland. You're going to miss him a little bit, but I still think Michigan is in very good position at tight end. Though we will have certainly some questions about the Chip Lindsey offense, how that works with tight end, but we're going to talk about it right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
For the second time today, happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And I am very much looking forward to seeing what the tight end group ends up looking like this upcoming season. Certainly, it's going to, I mean, it's not as inspiring as some other years. Certainly, I'm not gonna sugarcoat that, right? And even some other years that maybe weren't as good anyway, like that there was some excitement about, but you can always just find it, right? Like that's the thing with Michigan and tight ends; they can always seem to find it, right? No one was talking about Luke Schoonmaker, a 3-star who did not get, he was one of those who when he committed. I mean, I don't think I knew who he was before the day that he committed, and then I got word that, like, hey, Luke Schoonmaker is committing today. And so I pre-wrote it and got it ready and everything, but it was like, at that time, it was like, and I was at 24/7 Sports. I remember I was in Chicago for Big Ten Media Days, and I think I published it. He committed while I was at the airport to fly from Chicago to Detroit. And yet, he ended up being a second-round draft pick and one of Michigan's better tight ends. So I wouldn't look at it as a situation where you can sit there and say, well, no, Colston Loveland, that's not great. Obviously, they managed to win some games without Colston Loveland, right? He wasn't there for USC, Ohio State, or Alabama, and yet they won all three of those games. Obviously, the number one guy you look at is Marlin Klein. He is in my, prove it or lose it or whatever, however I phrased it. Certainly, as a guy that's got the size, he's got supposedly the speed and the athleticism. Not necessarily as dynamic of a player as Colston Loveland was, but still, I mean, 6'6", 247 according to last year's roster. Played high school football in Georgia, originally from Germany. You wouldn't really know that to listen to him talk at all. Sounds very Americanized, very impressive. But he enters his senior year as probably tight end number one in terms of being the guy that is probably going to be out there if he can be. I'd like to see more from him in terms of pass catching, of course, right? Like it's not that he was bad, but it certainly he's going to need to take a big step forward. Although he has thrived at blocking, if he's the most athletic guy in the room, then yes, I want to see him being able to be a big target that can catch some passes a little bit more. With Chip Lindsey, I think that they are going to, right, like they're, especially because he's looking at this offense. Chip Lindsey said this, that it's more about what they have rather than what he wants. So I think that because Michigan has been a tight end centric school for quite some time, they have a pretty good collection of tight ends. I think that he's going to look at this and say, like, we need to find a way to get the ball in the tight end's hands, and Marlin Klein would be a good place to start with that. However, I think that the tight end that's going to lead Michigan in receiving is he's Diet Colston Loveland. He's not Colston Loveland. He's Diet Colston Loveland. Maybe he can turn into that because Colston Loveland freshman year, yeah, we were excited going into his second year, right? We were definitely excited going into 2023 being like Colston Loveland can be the real deal. But it wasn't like he had done a lot his freshman year. He had the touchdown against Ohio State and Purdue, and then just that was really it, right? Because they still had, although they had a banged up Luke Schoonmaker. And who was the other one? They had another tight end that was pretty good. I can't even remember, and I don't feel like looking it up. Just talking to one of my old best friends yesterday, and we were saying how our memories are getting bad. And I'm like, I'm starting to forget, J.J. McCarthy's name. I think I actually had an episode where I forgot Blake Corum. I was like, the guy, he runs it. What's his name? But the one that I think that can absolutely be a dude this year is Hogan Hansen. He's 6'5", 236. If he bulks up a little bit, right? Because, and when I say a little bit, I just mean a little bit. I'm talking 5, 6, 7 pounds. Then he's literally got the same frame and body size as Colston Loveland, but he's kind of shown that ability to be that dynamic pass catching tight end. he had about the same amount of success, not in as big of games as Colston Loveland did. And I think that that would bode really well. I think that really, because you're looking at two guys that are going to be starting on either end, essentially, and you're going to account more for one to block and one to run. But at the same time, they could go 3 tight ends, right? They can go to 23 personnel. Do I have that right? I always mess that up too. But they can go to the 23 personnel. They can have the 3 tight ends. And the other one that we have to mention here in segment 1 is Max Bredeson, likely to be a team captain, more of a fullback, right? Like, he has split out wide and has run routes, but he's obviously a fullback. But that's the room that exists in. So I think that when you look at Max Bredeson and you add him to that mix, obviously then it's going to be a little bit more. Now here's the thing. They might end up subbing out Hogan Hansen because we have to see more blocking from him. They might sub him out for Zack Marshall, who we'll talk about more next segment, as that blocking guy, because that's kind of how the role he played when he came in. But nonetheless, Max Bredeson brings a lot of stability. It's probably one of the times that, like, Michigan fans love a fullback, right? They loved Khalid Hill when he switched over to that. Michigan fans love Max Bredeson. Maybe not as much as Khalid. Khalid was a character, though. Meme City, I call him. And I think that's a really solid group to start from. But who are the others that are going to be in? Because, right, like, Michigan will rotate. Maybe not as much as you kind of hope, right? Like, but it kind of depends on injury. They've got other guys that can absolutely do this. Now, Marlin Klein was a 3-star. Hogan Hansen was a 4-star. But there's other players that were generally 4 stars that are still in the room that I think can absolutely play a factor. Let's get to them here in just a moment. But before we do, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets, into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your short $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we're going to continue on here. I'm multitasking at the moment. So that's what's happening. You see me like looking over and clicking. You have my full attention. This is show related, but I am multitasking. That is also happening. All right, let's get back into the tight ends. Let me click back over here to the others, not to be confused with Lost and the others. So we've seen a couple other guys. Like we said, we saw Zack Marshall when Colston Loveland was injured. We saw him coming in more as a blocking guy. But outside of that, like that, they don't have a lot who have played a ton at the position that you would say, okay, yeah, that's going to be a guy that's going to come in and be reliable. Zack Marshall's really the only one. Like I said, he blocked well. Maybe he can catch. We don't know. He had a club on his hand, so that's kind of what precluded him from being that blocking type of guy. Or made him only a blocking type of guy. Precluded him from being a pass catcher. So I am curious to see, as he enters year 3, the former 3-star from Carlsbad, California, who has like the leadership qualities, by the way, right? He's the one who in his freshman year won the Enthusiasm Unknown to Mankind award that Jim Harbaugh was giving out. I don't know how official that award was, but every time I see him, he's smiling, right? Like he's just like, it's almost makes you a little angry because you're like, why is he so happy? And I understand as a Jesus follower, I should also be that happy all the time, but I'm not. You could be too, but nonetheless, it's you see him, he's always happy. So I would not be surprised if he worked his way, just because he's got not to sound like an HR department, he's got like the proper mental attitude to be able to climb up to like. And he's got the tight end size. He's like what? I mean, I guess I probably could look it up instead of guessing. He's 6'4". He doesn't look 6'4". He looks bigger than that, 235. But absolutely could be that guy. So who else is going to be coming in as a reserve in 2025? That's kind of one of the big questions, of course, because now you're starting to get into the depth. And unfortunately, they don't have a Max Hibner. They don't have a Louis Hansen. Those guys transferred out. They went elsewhere. Max Hibner had a good year at SMU. I don't know what the heck happened to Louis Hansen. But the first name that would come to my mind is sophomore Brady Prieskorn. At one time, coming out of Rochester Adams, he was like almost a 5-star. He ended up being kind of a middling 4-star by the time that everything was said and done. He's coming off of an injury sustained in pregame warmups against Ohio State. Word on the street is he's going to be absolutely okay for spring and so forward and all of that. But because generally, like Colston Loveland and Hogan Hansen are the exceptions and not the rule. So you look at that and you say, okay, I think that they're going to be that you can probably count on the sophomore tight end to start to kind of work his way in. Brady Prieskorn at 6'6", 245, according to last fall. I think that he's got a lot of the athleticism that you want, and you hope that he can take that big step forward. By the way, not just because I forgot to say it at the top, because I was doing some doing other show related things, right? Like I'm not writing an article here. We're going to wrap up tight ends in segment 2, and I want to talk about something else, combine related, in segment 3. So Brady Prieskorn would be the next one on my list. And then the big question for me is Deacon Tonielli. Can Deacon Tonielli, who is a 4-star, 6'5", 238, looks massive, right? Like, can he be a factor? He's entering year 3. I just do not recall seeing him at any point in time. Special teams or tight end, whatever it is. Can Deacon Tonielli find his way up the depth chart? He could absolutely benefit from, this is, again, the Chip Lindsey thing, because Chip Lindsey is going to have fresh eyes on everything, and he might see something that Steve Kazula maybe isn't seeing. Might see something and be like, ooh, we could use him this way, right? Like, there's still going to be a meritocracy, and they're still going to figure things out that way, but absolutely Deacon Tonielli's got a little bit of a clean slate, even though he's got the same position group, right? Like, coach for his position group, different offensive coordinator, see. This is why we do one show a day, because the second one, sometimes it's better, but sometimes it just goes nuts. I think that he's got that capability. He's got the athleticism. I know we say that about everybody, but I mean, it's true of most of the people we talk about. You can tell when I don't really like somebody. And I do like Deacon Tonielli. We just haven't seen him. Like seeing him as a recruit, not in person. I thought, okay, he's going to be that dude. And then sometimes it doesn't work out that way. I would have said the same thing of Brady Prieskorn over Hogan Hansen. Didn't quite go that way. But this is your shot, Deacon Tonielli. You got to make the most of it. He could have been on, and I don't think he was on, but he could have been on my prove it list from yesterday. Next, I got to talk about Jalen Hoffman, who's the backup at this point at fullback. Maybe we see him, maybe we don't. That's kind of all I got there. Came from the same high school as Matthew Hibner, actually. Burke, Virginia. Lake Braddock, Burke, Virginia. A couple years younger. They were loving the tight ends from Burke, Virginia. But more of a fullback. Maybe we see him, maybe we don't. That's kind of what we got there. And then the last name I'm going to mention is the true freshman, Eli Owens, who I think we will definitely see in year 1, even though he, again, is more of that fullback type. I think that they're just going to be like too eager to get him on the field. Listen, they love what he brings to the table, and he's going to be tied to the hip at Max Bredeson. It's not going to be any kind of disrespect to Jalen Hoffman, who's gotten quite a few mentions over the course of the last year from the coaching staff, as well as his teammates. I just think it's more likely than not that you're going to end up seeing Eli Owens getting in on the action. I don't have his numbers in front of me. A little bit shorter, a little stockier, and he was the first commitment of the last class. So, I'm just trying to prepare you. Like, don't be surprised if you see him come in, whether it's a 23 personnel type package, if it's something else, right? Like I can see where him and Max Bredeson, them figuring out the way to get them both on the field at the same time. I would not be shocked, would not be surprised. And I just know that they absolutely love what he brings to the table. So stay tuned for that. All right. I want to talk about briefly something that came out of the combine that I found absolutely hilarious. I know that you will too. If you're a Michigan fan, if you're a Buckeye lurker, you will not. Let's talk about that here in just a moment. Yes, we're on the shorter side with the second show for both shows today. As we finish out our winter outlook, we are done with the official position groups, and we move on to other topics. We will still probably have some like offense, defense type overall overview previews of each side in the future episodes while we wait for spring ball to kick off, whenever that is. Usually the Monday after Pro Day, whatever day that ends up being, which tends to be Friday somewhere in early to mid-March. All right. Mason Graham was asked at the NFL Scouting Combine today, what highlights should NFL teams look at? Like that's kind of it's not really an interesting question, is what I would actually say. I'd say it's almost a lazy question from someone who just hasn't watched any Michigan football, because you can basically just be like, put on the tape and he's just balling out. That's just kind of how Mason Graham rolls. But I could see where you want to see what he thinks the best he's done, like where it lied. I probably would have said something more along the lines of Alabama or Washington in 2023 in the playoff run. I love Mason Graham's answer, though. He said, basically, why don't you just watch the Ohio State tape? Just go turn on the Ohio State tape. Why is that? That is wonderful on multiple levels, because it's not just a couple plays against Ohio State. He's saying, like, watch the whole game. I blew them up. And remember, going into that game, all the talk about Ohio State was, and after, by the way, was the retooled offensive line and how it was paying dividends. It was working. And Michigan completely beat them up front. Completely. You know, it wasn't just Mason. It was Kenneth. It was Rayshawn. It was Jayshawn Barham, right? But, Mason is the engine that made it go. So that's pretty phenomenal that he can just say, like, just watch that. Because also what makes it that much better is, of course, there's going to be all kinds of Ohio State love right now because they won the national championship. And there's very few people that can say anything about it that can kind of put Ohio State back in its place. I mean, its place, honestly, at the moment is a national champion. But to kind of bring them back down to earth a little bit, because, like a lot of the national champions don't necessarily have that, right? Michigan didn't have that. You know, when Georgia won in 2021, they lost to Alabama and then beat Alabama. So it's kind of like, right? Like, it's like how Ohio State is with Oregon. Like, Oregon can be like, yeah, we beat you at home. And Ohio State fans can be like, we don't care. We blew you out in the Rose Bowl. Ohio State doesn't have bragging rights over Michigan, especially because Michigan's a year removed from a national championship. So for Mason Graham, rather, to go out there and just be like it's a troll move to some degree, but he's also not wrong. That, like, it was a masterpiece of a game. It wasn't just like a couple highlights of like, oh, I really think that I played a pivotal role in this one play against Michael Penix, or I think about how against Minnesota in 2023, even with a club on my hand, I was really blowing up the offensive line, or against Alabama on that final play, like, you know, it was Josiah and me and a couple, you know, and Derek, we all kind of really worked together to finish that game off and all that. Like, you could say any of those things as individual highlights. The fact that he comes out and is just like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and say the whole of the Ohio State game. It does not get much better than that. I will use this moment, because we still have a couple minutes left, to just kind of segue into the idea that, like, just because Mason Cole, that must be in the head. I miss Mason Cole. He's a good guy. But Mason Graham is moving on. I think that, and we talked about this yesterday when we were talking about the defensive tackles. I think Michigan's still in a good spot to be able to continue to dominate. Now, the big question is, with two guys who aren't homegrown, can they be what I think that they can be? Damon Payne and Trey Williams coming from other schools. right? It took Cam Good a year before you finally were like, ooh, I don't want them to take Cam Good out. Coming from UCF, didn't really seem like he had the full like shape that he needed to be in order to play. So, I mean, that's a question, but at the same time, like Rayshawn Benny, Trey Pierce, Ike Iwunnah, those are guys that absolutely balled out against Alabama and absolutely like maybe it wasn't the whole game, but for like half of the game, they completely dominated up front. So even without Mason Graham, I think that they are going to be in an absolute good position with what they have. And that includes the Ohio State of it all, because they're going to have a new offensive line coach. Will that end up mattering? I mean, that's a little hard to say at this point, right? Because it might. Ohio State fans were absolutely decrying Justin Fry until the playoff, really, for the most part. But they've got a lot to replace there. And Michigan, while it does have a lot to replace in terms of Mason and Kenneth, we've already seen the backups come in. And then you add in other guys that if they can have the buy-in that is necessary, part culture, part just buy-in, and moving forward, if Lou Esposito can get the most out of them, then that's going to bode really well for the end of November again this upcoming year. So that's where I'm at with that. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Part 2 of 2. If you checked in on this one, didn't see the one where we talk about the linebackers, that one's available for you as well. So go check that out. We will be back with 2 on Thursday. Mailbag for the second time this week will be on Friday. That is the plan as of now. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.